This moment, this exact feeling, I wish I could save it for another time. According to Walter Benjamin, art, before mechanical reproduction, i.e. photography, had an aura. Aura is the here and now of the work of art. It's this unique existence and nothing else that bears the mark of the history to which the work has been subject. Aura is basically the stuff that the original has that the reproduction, no matter how precise it is, it doesn't have, because the original is tied to a specific time and place. But now that we have the capability to reproduce things, we don't really have to restrict ourselves to going to the Louvre to see the Mona Lisa. And according to Benjamin, this is a very important distinction, and it changes our relationship to art. He goes as far as to say that the more you replicate a piece of art, the value of that art goes down. And it's not just art. Objects and places also have an aura. I'm sitting on this log, listening to the seashell, and I feel the aura of the beach. But when I take this home so that I can have a little piece of the beach all the time, it has less aura. And this has even less aura. Aura is attached to the thing in its purely unmediated form. The beach is there, sharing the same space and time as me. Today, you see lots of mediations of the beach, and that shows the change in our societal values. We value things for their ability to be seen by the largest number of people, rather than for their unique existence. And apparently, we're accelerating this loss of aura with our constant desire to pry an object from its shell, or to be close to something, or to be able to examine it. But mind you, Walter Benjamin wrote this theory in 1936, and maybe if he was alive today, he would have had a totally different idea. Like, what about NFTs? It could be the one and only copy in this world, but, it lives in the digital realm. So the concept of its presence in space and time is kind of totally irrelevant, right? But I think the part of this theory that still is very relevant is how we interact with objects that we deem to have an aura. When an object is deemed to have an intrinsic value, we might guard it or hide it away, and we probably spend more time looking at it in a more contemplative manner. When people say, when you go look at the Mona Lisa, try to experience the painting and try to be in its presence. But with reproducible works of art, we tend to look at it less carefully or speed through it in a less focused manner. It's the same with information. When books were handwritten over a time span of years, they used to hide them from the public because they were scared that they were going to get damaged or burned or lost. And they would literally chain the books to the desks. And what happened is, when you finally got a hold of the book, you would read it and really take in every word of the book. But now, with massive amounts of information everywhere we go, I think it's pretty safe to say that we take things a little less to heart. Umberto Eco, author and semiotician, said that books in his library had an aura. He had a collection of 50,000 books, and he said as he would roam around his library on more than one occasion, he would stumble across a book, and when he read it, that book magically contained information that was vital to his research. He was a really strange person. But he called his library an anti-library, and he filled it with books that he'd never read. He said lots of people have a library to show off their knowledge, to say, look at all these books I read. But he uses it as a research tool. And he roams around his library, and I think he believes that he is physically inches away from discovering new information, and that physical presence of the books had the power to pull him closer to what he needed. This idea of aura, or the loss of aura in our culture, isn't just happening with art or information, but it's also happening with our built environments. Cities are made up of streets, and streets are characterized by the building's facades. A building's facade is basically a fancy name, well, for the building's face. It expresses the building's character, and it gives you a glimpse of what might be happening inside. And it's designed to catch people's attention. With our culture's obsession with images, we experience architecture differently, and our environments are adapting to satisfy this new way of experiencing architecture, all the way down to the process of how we design. We tend to focus more on the shareable moments in our buildings, and I am totally guilty of this. Architecture is becoming increasingly rushed and impatient, leading to issues of experiential impoverishment. Our built environments are void of any sense of mystery or aura, and just like what's happened with art or information, I think the way we experience the world is becoming more and more one-dimensional. And we start to value architecture not necessarily for its experiential qualities, but for its ability to be photographed and seen by the largest number of people. Venice is probably one of the most extreme examples of a city whose aura has been completely and utterly destroyed. Thanks to the iconic images, it's become one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world. It gets something around 20 million visitors every year. It shows up in movies and books, and it's probably one of the most universally recognizable locations. I'm not gonna lie, when I first visited Venice, I also had my preconceptions until I learned this concept called derive, which directly translates into drifting. It's actually a method devised by the Situationist Internationals for navigating through Venice, and they define derive as an unplanned, unexpected passage through an urban landscape where participants stop their daily routines and allow themselves to be drawn by the attractions of the terrain and the encounters that they find there. It's a place of both connection and non-connection, a place designed specifically for getting lost. From a totally functional point of view, Venice is kind of the worst place to live. It floods, it's full of tourists, the buildings are old, it's practically not accessible for anyone with mobility issues, and you can't drive, you can't bike, and in that sense, it's the ultimate anti-city. So why is it that so many Venetians who's been driven out of the city for all of these reasons that I just mentioned still dream about one day moving back there and living there? I think it ultimately has something to do with aura. That in the end, it's a totally and completely unique place. There's no other place like it on Earth. There's no one else that can replicate the environment, the history, and the city's presence in time and space. Not even the most perfect replica has the aura of Venice. But as an architect, I still try to look for patterns in the built environment, not necessarily to replicate, but to see if there's any elements that we can learn from. And as I try to study the built fabric to understand why it feels so different from other cities, I was able to distill certain elements or recurring conditions that helped in creating this sense of mystery. Framing. Framing is used to hide or highlight certain elements. In this case, a narrow gap between the corners of two buildings perfectly frame the corner of the Basilica dei Frari. Dead ends. A key aspect of the derive or drifting is allowing yourself to be drawn by the attractions of the terrain. And as I drift through these alleys, I kept coming across these dead ends. Initially, I'd turn around and backtrack, but on instances when I kept going, I found that it's not a dead end after all. and the corner reveals another alley. Point of interest. As I moved through these narrow alleys, I kept feeling a constant pulling, like a push to keep walking. It's obviously the narrowness of the tunnel, but also the light at the end of the alley or a tunnel that created this point of interest. Compression and release. When I followed the light and reached the end of the tunnel, I would often be pleasantly surprised to find myself in a light-filled courtyard or an opening to a canal or anything that created a feeling of expansion. And as I walked for hours and hours, I felt a constant compression and release in the landscape. Layering. Layering creates anticipation, depth, and a more interesting and memorable narrative when walking through space. What all of these conditions did for me is it created a sense of curiosity that made me want to discover more, and also a kind of safety. I've never once felt scared or like I was in danger. The city is so safe because there's no dangerous corners. That sounds like a really obvious statement, but let's say typical city with streets and back alleys. The alleys are the leftover spaces, and that's where all the dodgy stuff happens. But in Venice, everything is an alley, and there's no front and back, and everything is just a continuous labyrinth, and there's doors and windows onto each path. So after walking around for a while and just being led by my curiosity, that's when I discovered really cool gems. Lots of people think Venice is a static city. I mean, there's been virtually no new construction in Venice for hundreds of years, but actually it has been transforming at a micro scale. Since we can only guess the functions inside, the buildings urge us to discover more rather than telling us exactly what they are. You see this especially in the neighborhood of Cannaregio, which was once a Jewish ghetto. These seemingly benign residential buildings, when you go inside, they have synagogues with ornate, lavish details that you can only discover by exploring further inside. It's our knowledge, the things that we're sure of, that makes the world go wrong and keeps us from seeing and learning. We have a tendency to put the things that we know or our knowledge on a pedestal and treat it as the ideal truth, when our knowledge is often incomplete and subjective. Venice only started to reveal itself to me when I left my preconceived ideas of Venice and kind of allowed myself to be lost and blindly led by my curiosities and instincts. I let my feet choose the wrong turns and I let the light or the textures draw me into different directions. And only then did I discover a side of Venice that was totally and intimately unique to me. This Venice is fleeting. You can't photograph it, and you can't take it with you, and it can't be shared. This Venice can only be experienced and live as a memory. This Venice has an aura that can't be destroyed, because it can never be replicated and never fully attained. This video is a part of a bigger project where I try to turn some of the ideas from my thesis project into a series of videos. The videos together create a whole, so if you found this video interesting and want to check out the rest, I'm going to leave the playlist right here. There's also so many ideas and concepts in the thesis that I'm not able to capture neatly in a 10-minute YouTube video. So if you want to read the entire thesis project in detail, you can access a digital copy by clicking the link below in the description and by becoming a producer of the channel. By becoming a producer, you're supporting me and continuing to make these thesis videos, which is something I absolutely love making. But they're a huge amount of work and they're very expensive to make. I decided not to have any brand sponsorships on these, and if it's backed by a community that actually wants to see it through, it'll have more meaning that way. Stay tuned for the next video, which I'm probably gonna get out in the next 2 months. Please like and share this video. And remember, I have a Discord server and a newsletter, which are all free to join. I'm gonna leave the links to all of these and the membership tiers in the description. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.